Hi there, my name is Molen Dinarius, and you may have encountered me before, though it's unlikely, on YouTube, where I have a channel called the Latinum Institute with 37,000 at the moment subscribers. That channel is devoted to teaching language. This channel is also about language, but a different kind of language. It's the language of music, and I've called the channel MiFa, Tota, Musica. This is taken from an expression found in the Middle Ages, quoted by Bach. You can see there on the left-hand side of your screen a little piece in Bach's handwriting. Fa mi et mi fa est tota musica. Fa mi and mi fa is the entirety of music, and we're going to be looking at this. On the right hand side we have a work by Buxted, also entitled this Ut mi sol re fa la tota musica. So ut mi sol re fa la is the entirety of music, and harmonia aeterna and eternal harmony. And this is by Johann Heinrich Buxted, and it's an important work on this subject as well. We're going to be looking at how music was taught for many, many hundreds of years, and I'm going to be reconstructing this curriculum. A large part of this would be impossible without the help and work of this gentleman, Nicholas Baraguanov, The Disappearing Book. Let's see if I can make it actually appear. Looks like not. Let's see if I can make this book. There it is. Magic. Haha. Yes. So, the solfeggio tradition, the forgotten art of melody in the long 18th century by Nicholas Baraguanov, where he reconstructs this methodology. It was used pretty much throughout Europe by every single musician, and the things that we use now to learn music were unknown to musicians before the time of Beethoven. Music was taught differently. The scale was understood differently. It was understood to contain 6 notes, not 7. And how does this work? This thing is called the hexachord, the 6-note scale, as opposed to our heptachord, the 7-note scale. And of course we call it an octave because we repeat the first note, but there only are 7 individual notes, and then the repetition is the 8th or octave. So how's the course going to work? What I'm going to be doing is the following. So I'm just going to give me a second here, because I'm not editing this video, so it'll just be as it is. So to continue, in this series I'm going to be presenting the work to you in the form of a course, but I'm going to be labeling the videos in such a way that you can decide which sections to work on, or to ignore them completely if you so wish. To begin with, we're going to look at the hexachords and the 6-note scale, di sotto and di sopra, the 6-note scale above and the 6-note scale below, and how these compound to form the compound scale, which then gives us our complete scale with our major and minor included in the scale. We're going to learn how to modulate from one key to another to give us what in modern textbooks is called the circle of fifths, but was not understood in this way in earlier times. Although the method was used, of course. And then we're going to look at scale practice and how to do that. Then we're going to be having a series of lessons of practical application of how to learn this method of using the solfeggio to teach yourself the language and vocabulary of music as it was taught. And we're going to use a work by Artemis Nixon Johnson, designed for teaching singing, in which he has some excellent exercises for continuous practice, as he puts it. This is for internalizing the scales in each key, in most common keys. The next part of the course is going to be related, and that's going to be thorough bass. And the reason we're going to be learning this is that the whole goal of the method, the way musicians were taught, was not to produce people who could sit down and read a score and interpret it, but people who could sit down at an instrument and who could play, for example, variations on a tune, who could improvise. That was what a musician was. Frederick Coleman, has an interesting observation. He was the organist at the King's Chapel in London. And he says, well, if you can only read music, then you are like somebody who can read French, but you can't speak a word of it. We need to be able to know how to speak the language of music, and that means we need to be able to understand how it works and be able to play music in the same way that we can speak in sentences. So in the beginning, of course, it's going to be very basic. We're going to be doing very simple things, just like a beginning language student starts with, hello, it's a beautiful day today, how are you, what is the way to town, where is the lavatory, and things like that. Can I please have a coffee? Can you pass the salt? That kind of thing. So we're going to be doing the musical equivalent of that to begin with, learning the very, very basic things that will, in the end, give you the facility to be able to speak music. Jazz musicians can do it, but nowadays classical musicians and musicians of historical music, for the large part, there are some people who can, but for the large part, no longer can. Some organists still cultivate this skill to some degree, but apart from players of that instrument, it's an extremely rare skill nowadays. So we'll start off with the common chord, and we'll be using a number of historical texts and the exercises in those texts, and I will be giving you a guide of how to proceed, and you can either follow what I am teaching, or you can use it as a springboard for your own imagination. And there is a lot of that around. This, above all, is about playing. When we say we play music, we really do play. We play around. We mess around an enormous amount to learn this material. So you get some basic things, and then you literally play with them until they are internalized. So we'll be learning the common chords of the scala di sotto, the common chords of the scala di sopra, 3 versions of each chord, and then we're going to learn how to pivot from one related chord to another related chord, and then learn our chords in pairs, in an infinite variety of chords, pivoting on fifths and on thirds, which gives us an enormous amount of variation. And then we're going to be both playing these as arpeggios and as straightforward chords. And then we're going to learn the cadences for each key. And that will be the beginning course. And that should keep me busy for some time. And once I've gone through everything to this degree, so you have learned the basic solmization, as it was taught in the conservatories in Naples and throughout Europe until the 1830s. What we have here on the top right is the Gesanglehre from the great Metropolitan Cathedral of Vienna. which was the last holdout of teaching the Neapolitan method of music before it was pretty much destroyed by the fixed do system, which took hold across Europe. And the fixed do system, although on the face of it seems easier, actually is less intuitive and imparts less information and is far more complex, although initially perhaps it's easier for an amateur to learn music using this system. So Joseph Preindl was the Kapellmeister, holding a position that Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was applying for at the moment, at the time he died. And Mozart would have been the Kapellmeister in all probability. He was certainly teaching at the cathedral, we know that, and giving lessons, doubtless in solfeggio, and doubtless very similar to the method that is contained in this book, published in 1830. As I said, one of the last texts published using the old method before the French method took over. Napoleon, of course, conquered most of Europe, and he installed his brother as the ruler of Naples, and his brother took a keen interest and imposed the French curriculum on the schools of Naples, and so the old Italian curriculum died, and no more texts were published. However, the conservatories in Naples kept everything, and there are thousands of manuscripts of the old method, and that's one thing that Nick Baragwanath had started to do, was to go through this material, and there's been renewed interest in this, so there are a number of PhD theses that have been written. We know that Bach taught using this method, and that the thorough bass before the 1800s, the 1830s, was the universal way that musicians were taught how to learn music and how to compose music and how to think in music. Now, this method wasn't favored by the universities because it is essentially a craft method as opposed to an academic method of studying music, and the universities were interested in highfalutin philosophical analysis of music, not the practical craft skill, which was taught in the conservatories of Naples and was taught by practical musicians, because after all, musicianship was a practical skill, much like joinery. So if you can imagine that you had a fine carpenter who knew all about carpentry but could not make a table for you, that is the situation with those who study theory of music in universities today. They essentially know all about it but cannot build the table, whereas somebody like Mozart or Bach, they knew how to build the table. And that's what we are going to be doing. We are going to be learning the musicianship that will give us the ability to speak and think in music, as it was expected that a musician could think and speak in music in times gone by. I hope you enjoy this and the course itself that I'm going to put together. It's been a fascinating journey for me. I've waited some time before I started the course, slowly digesting the material until I found a way through to presenting it that would be useful and help get you where you need to go. There's an enormous amount of textual material available from the 18th century and earlier, but making it acceptable and easy to use for a modern user, especially somebody who doesn't have a teacher in front of them to explain it, took some thinking on my part about how to go about doing it. I think I've arrived at the point where I'm ready to present this to you. So that's the end of my introductory video. And the following videos, we will start with the basic hexachords and move on from there. I hope you enjoyed that. You can find me, of course, at Patreon. You're welcome to subscribe either at MiFa, Tota, Musica, or you can subscribe at the Latinum Institute. It doesn't really make a difference. Either way, you end up supporting me. But if you are interested in music, then MiFa, Tota Musica at Patreon. Bye.